So, Lynn, tell us about some of your first connections with David and the cantata singers.
My first memories of David Hoose was singing with him in a group called Canciones Sacre, which was all music by Schutz and Schein. In that group were Sandy Sylvan, David Ripley, Frank Kelly, Bill Hite, Amy Zorn, Susan Klebanow, Margaret Johnson, and Lorraine Hunt Lieberson. I came in, I was singing second soprano. That experience changed my life and continued to change throughout all of these years. I'm reminded again of how David influenced my music making and my whole musical soul as we're rehearsing for this concert. And I can talk about that later if you want.
So how long has it been, Lynn? How long have you been singing with David and the cantata singers?
With the cantata singers, I think maybe late 80s. I don't remember the exact date. I know that I sang with Canciones Sacre in the mid to late 80s, 85, 86. I've known him that long.
It was a very strange accident that I even came in contact with David Hoose and cantata singers. I was frantically packing my apartment in Madison, Wisconsin, and shoving it on a moving truck. Defended my thesis that evening and flew from Madison, Wisconsin to Boston the next day. And I was starting work the following day and I was exhausted. So I had one day and I thought, well, I'm just going to drive and look for a park someplace to just chill out. This is May. And somehow I didn't know one person in Boston, not one. And somehow I got talking to someone whose name I should know and remember because I see it around town, see him around town on programs and things sometimes. But we got into a long conversation and he asked about what my experience was. And I told him, I said, oh, I'd like to look for a choir to sing with in the fall. And after we had talked for a long time, he said, well, I think cantata singers might be the group for you to look at. And so I registered that, and come the fall, I think there were the things advertised in the papers and there were just all these different groups and everything. It was a little overwhelming. And I thought, well, that guy said that cantata singers was a really good group and that he thought I would fit in well there. So I went to the audition and that was it. So I remember David asking me about who I'd sung with and Robert Fountain, and we were fortunate to have Robert Fountain in Madison at the time. And that was the fall of 1984 that I started. So this is like 37 years or something now.
That's an amazing first experience. I remember my first experience with the cantata singers was I had been singing with other groups for a while in the Boston area. And it's not that I needed a break, but I did want a different kind of ensemble because, for instance, one was a very large group and that kind of thing. And I thought I would just go to some concerts and listen to the groups and see which ones I liked. And so I don't know what sent me specifically to a cantata singers concert, but I went to a cantata singers concert and I was blown away. It was really good. And so I went up after the concert to speak with David Hoose. I'd never met him. And I just wanted to say, I said to him, this was a really good concert. Thank you. And he said, you sound like a tenor. And I said, well, I am. He says, well, why don't you come and audition or whatever? And so I thought about it and I decided to audition. But what had happened is I did the audition, and after the audition, but I think even before I heard the results of the audition, I was walking in Harvard Square and I happened to run into David, and David was there with a couple other people just walking down the street. I think Paula was one of them. And so I saw David and Paula, and David walked up and he hugged me. And I thought, really? This is a conductor that I've met like once and after a concert, and then the audition, and he hugged me. So so anyway, it was a fun experience to see him the first time. So.
I do remember him giving a lot of hugs. Always on the first day back after the fall, but I remember my first encounters with Sandy Sylvan and Frank Kelly, and he hugged everybody.
So, and I think he's still that way. So that's a nice thing about David. A very huggable conductor.
Funny stories don't come to my mind either, but I can say what was fun. One of the great experiences and really fun experiences, what happened after cantata singers rehearsals. Every Wednesday night, we would go to a Mexican restaurant. Every Wednesday night, we'd go to a Mexican restaurant in Harvard Square. And we would be joined by a couple of other members of the choir. Bill Cutter came when he was part of the group. And a couple of David's conducting students would come every Wednesday night. And what did we talk about? We talked about programming. What about this program? What can we put with this program? Oh, let's do this one. But do those two pieces work together? Who might be part of that? Those conversations were so much fun to get everyone's perspective on what would make a good program. It was like, it was so creative and at the same time really very joyous and stimulating.
That's how we got all those great programs.
Well, we also drank a few margaritas while we were there too. I'm sure both of you understand there are so many highlights, so many concerts that were deeply inspiring, moving, enlightening. Schumann, Mozart, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, Stravinsky, Bach, Schütz, Schein, new compositions. It went on and on. I have to say one of my very favorite pieces to sing was Charles Fussel's Specimen Days, which we performed twice and I still love very much. My most important impression and experience with David started, as I mentioned, in Canzone Sacre and went all the way to our last rehearsal last week for the Haydn and the Vaughan Williams. After a concert that we did with Canzone Sacre at Brandeis, or actually during it, I had the experience that David had been trying to get from us, which was that you have to be present for every single moment. You have to be present for every single shape. Music doesn't stop. And so when you're on the train of the music, you personally bring the music to life in a way that is unique and magical. This is what David taught me. So many things, but this remains constant. We experienced it all of the rehearsals where David said, you have to pay attention to this eighth note. You have to pay attention to this word stress, this phrase, this harmony. And by doing that, the music becomes not just enlivened, but truly created in that moment. That experience that I experienced that first time with Canzone Sacre was so exhilarating and life-changing because I felt that I felt part of the music making as opposed to performing it.
As a soloist, because you've been in the chorus and as a soloist, that must have been an interesting challenge. What are some of the differences that you may have noticed about David in preparation for concerts and things as a soloist as opposed to another member of the ensemble?
None. No, because the same standards that he uses with the chorus is what he used for the soloists. The same shaping, the same attention to detail, the same thoughtful analysis in the for the purpose of creation. All of that happened. Now, it was a little more intense, you can imagine, when you are you're the only other person in the room with David. So that was always a challenge, to live up to the standard that David was setting for me. When I was able to even come close to it, it was thrilling.
One of the things that we're talking about highlights and things, and as a soloist, Lynn, there were a couple of performances that you did which were amazing because you played the character. And there was one, I think you showed up in this red dress and you were this really lusty, sultry.
I remember that. That was in the Kurt Weill year. And we did some solo songs before we went into the rest of the program. And I think there were a lot of Gershwin. I think it was everybody was singing Gershwin songs. And the song that I remember singing was Do It Again. And I wore a red dress. It was so much fun.
Well, as Lynn said, there's, over so many years, there are so many to choose from. And I've never been a huge, I always enjoy the performances of the Bach, and I know the group is grounded on that, but they never really come to mind on my hits list. Usually, and it's hard for me to explain which things make that, except they're just things that I feel just a real emotional connection, or I just was very emotional during performances. And those are the ones that tend to stick in my mind. So Slavery Documents was certainly one for so many different reasons. I mean, the music was great. Being in Symphony Hall was great. Singing with this large mixed chorus of African-American and other singers. I think you mentioned, Dwight, I was driving somebody else from the other chorus home every time, and we got to just chat and talk. And there were just so many things. I thought it was a great thing that we were doing at the time, even though it was fraught with complications and division and things. But I loved having that experience. I also love Specimen Days. I just never will forget Carl Dan Sorensen singing Red-Haired Boy on the Bridge at Night. Brings tears to my eyes. I love the Verdi Requiem that we did, which is sort of a not very cantata singers kind of thing, but it was great. I'll never forget, we've done Frida auf Erden several times, but the time right by when the bombs started falling in the Kuwait War, that is etched in my mind forever. I was guilty because I was stuck in a barber chair longer than I should have been. And so I was late getting rehearsal. And because of that, I knew that I was the only person on stage that heard the top of the 7 o'clock news. So I heard that they had just started dropping bombs there. And we finished singing that piece, and I sheepishly raised my hand and just shared that fact with everyone on stage. And David just stepped back and sat down, and we just had complete silence for about 2 or 3 minutes. And then he stood up and he just had us sing it again. And it was just amazing. And we also did it twice for the audience and the performance the next day, I believe. And anyway, that will always be in my mind. I loved a lot of the a cappella concerts just because we really got to hear us, and they were not as big works a lot of times, but just, put together so nicely. The Frank Martin double choir mass I loved.
Great.
We've done Les Noces. You mentioned Rake's Progress. I love the Fourier Requiem. I love the seasons that we focused on one composer like Kurt Weill or Vaughan Williams. There are just so many.
Carrie, thank you for bringing up Rake's Progress. I can't believe that I left that out of my
Yes,
list of favorites.
stage director and all. That was amazing
I was just,
experience.
Bill Cutter had introduced me to Rake's Progress when I was in graduate school with him, and I fell in love with it. So when the opportunity came for us to do it, David asked me to direct it. It was one of the most exhilarating experiences really of my musical life. With David conducting Stravinsky and with Bill Hite singing Rake's Progress, singing Tom Rakewell. The whole cast was magnificent. The chorus was amazing. And I got to sit in the audience.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I sat in the audience and got to watch it. It's really one of the highlights of my life.
It was nice to see that we could do something like that, all of us little stodgy singers.
Not so stodgy.
Thanks for getting us out of our shell.
Yes, Rake's Progress was very much a lot of fun, and I remember I had to a part that involved motion and what have you with Susan Navian, and I mean I knew her but not well. But after the rehearsals and the movement, it's like, wow, we've become friends because of all this motion and things that we were doing together.
Was that after the brothel scene, Dwight?
Yes. One of the things that
Susan Navy, one of the first people that comes to mind.
One of the things that you had mentioned about David and Lynn, you had mentioned about David and about how meticulous he is. One of the things that I've learned from David is that you'll see a note on a page and you can sing that note, but when you're singing that note, it has length, it has direction, has motion. There's sound that happens after you stop the note, and you have to inform that sound, that whatever. And so it's just really interesting to sing with David, especially again some of the a cappella pieces, because it's not about the note and the sound that you're making on that note, but where is that going? And how does that tie into the meaning of this? And you had mentioned, Carrie, about the seasons where we did themes, and one of the themes that we did was about the Deerfield Massacre. And I didn't know much about it.
Right.
And as a result of that, I was deeply moved to be able to be part of that and to learn from it. And I think that's one of the advantages of singing with David and the cantata singers, is that you leave changed.
Yes, Dwight, that's so true. I felt that way about all of the commissions as well. Learning them, performing them for the first time or perhaps the second time. The experience of singing the mezzo solo in John Harbison's Four Psalms was also another life-changing experience for me. The opening has these great cantorial melismas at the very beginning of the piece in the prelude. At the time that I sang that, I had no intention of becoming an ordained cantor. But there was something about that felt so right to me and felt so part of my soul, that when I finally decided to become a cantor, that experience of singing Four Psalms informed a lot of my inspiration for that.
Wow. All the altos had red highlights in their hair.
That's hysterical. There were days when we all arrived in the same shirt. When I was singing with the altos, Diane Sokol did a weekly review of the color. Like, she would say, "Oh wow, everybody's wearing purple today," or "Oh look, everybody's got on the same shade of blue," which is hysterical. And she was right.
I can remember her saying those things.
We should also mention Diane Sokol's amazing snacks. I mean, the snacks, everybody really loved the snacks. We loved talking to each other, but the first thing that happened is everybody rushed to the table looked to see what was good, what was going to be good there. And Susan brought these amazing egg salad sandwiches with the crusts cut off. And
Kumi brought those.
Kumi brought those. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
Susan brought
And
other
Bob
stuff.
Henry brought good treats. There were certain
Oh.
James Lou's cookies. I do have my favorites.
Yes, Diane Sokol was and she was
Okay.
always ready to give out the recipe too.
But no one beat Epps' little meatballs.
Nope, I agree. There's no question about it.
So I guess these were the catastrophes of COVID that we haven't done that, since COVID. But yeah, those are some fun things.
It's terrible to say one of the highlights of the rehearsals at Cantata Singers was snack time, but
well, we also got very little time to socialize with each other, so I always look forward to it for that. Coming from, colleges and schools before that, I was a science major all the time, but all of my social activities really revolved around my music friends. So it was a little different to come to Cantata Singers. And I remember my very, very first rehearsal, I sat next to Charlie Husbands. And when the rehearsal was over, remember, I don't know anybody in Boston. So I said, well, does anybody go out or anything afterwards? And, for a beer or something. And he said, well, not really, but I'll go out for a beer with you if you want. And so we did. Just the two of us. Anyway.
Well, that's a funny experience.
That was very nice of him. I think back all these many years later and think that was out of his usual comfort zone, I'm sure.
Well, that's probably on the opposite side of the spectrum of one of my first rehearsal experiences with the Cantata Singers, which is I show up and I believe we were rehearsing in Temple Sinai, I think so. And so we were rehearsing there. I sit down between Carl Dan Sorensen and his name will come to me. But anyway, and David starts off and everybody's like reading and singing and it's really fast and I'm thinking, whoa, am I in the right place? And I had done a lot of music before, but it just had a different tempo. And of course, David likes to take things faster than, sometimes you're used to. And at the end of it, Carl Dan said to me, he says, "It's okay, Dwight, you'll get it." And that was just enough to say, okay, I'm not leaving. I'm not walking out of the room. It was very encouraging. It was nice to sit next to Carl Dan for a number of the rehearsals in that session. That was great.
I remember Carl Dan.
Press record, Dwight.
So well. I remember Carl Dan, when I was singing The Creation, it was one of the first solos that I sang with Cantata Singers. I believe Don Wilkinson was singing that third part and I was Eve. I think the review said it was lusty, but I was scared to death. And Carl Dan said to me, he said, "You're good. You're just going to be fine. Take a deep breath, be confident, don't be scared. This is going to be a wonderful experience." And he gave me the courage to really go on stage for that performance.
So Lynn, is there a theme going on here? That's the second program where it was described, your performance was described as lusty.
No, I don't think so, Dwight. When I was singing the cantorial solo at the beginning of Four Psalms, I'm not sure that anybody had that in their mind.
Is that the one with the red dress?
No, it's not a red dress. Oh, don't put that in the recording. Really don't.
Really.
So Carrie, there were some other things that you were going to talk about with respect to David and rehearsing and that kind of thing.
Well, I was just thinking when we had a moment off that, coming prior to cantata singers, most of my singing had been with, university choruses and things in college and grad school and things, and I always, there were music majors, and the majority of us weren't music majors, and some town and country things that did have some other professional people in it. So when I got into cantata singers, I didn't really think about it being any different. Because there were obviously some of all of those things. But as time went on, and I always liked the fact that there were math teachers and lawyers and a whole variety of people. I've always enjoyed that. But I did become aware that there were more, there were a lot of music majors. And as time went on, I think more and more, at some point in time, I was just struck by how many conductors of college choruses were choosing to sing with David and cantata singers. I think it was like between 10 and 12 at a time. We had Harvard, we had Brandeis, just had all these colleges that were represented. Their choral directors were coming to sing with us, which just helped, made me realize how privileged I was to be singing with this group of great people, and that they were obviously coming there for a reason, and a lot of that reason was David Hoose.
Yeah.
And Carrie, I think that also applies to soloists, because one of the things that I found fascinating when I first arrived at the cantata singers is how many soloists were just singing in the ensemble. And it was very interesting because you can say, we have an interesting program coming up. Who wants to sing the solos? Whereas in most other groups is, we have an interesting program coming up, we're hiring outside soloists. And so, and one of the things that sometimes people ask me, it's like, so they sing in the chorus and they don't get paid unless they're doing a solo. And it's just the fact that they want to, and I count you as one of those people that they want to be in the chorus, in the ensemble as a soloist, even when they're not doing a solo, I think is,
oh my God, Dwight, it was such a privilege.
Right.
Always. It never occurred to me that getting paid for singing in the chorus, it never occurred to me that was something that was a requirement.
Well, David, first of all, thank you for marrying me. That was quite memorable. And when it concerns cantata singers, I know you and I have not always seen eye to eye on rehearsal styles and time management, but I really believe that any performance any program we worked on, I might be sweating it out till the end of whether we were going to get it all together and stuff, but I learned after a while that I should be telling everybody to come to these concerts, because without fail, they were always going to be wonderful performances. And you never let us down. They were always great. Even when I sing other places now and with other people, I still sort of hear you in the back of my head, no, this is where the stress should be. The syllable would go this way, and I just think, why don't people just know how to do that? And I realize it's like 30 plus years of you telling me to do that it's finally sinking in. So thank you for the great adventure. And we love you, David.
David, I don't know how I can possibly thank you for changing my life. Working with you over these many years has changed the way I listen to music. It's changed the way I perform music. It's changed the way I've taught my students. It's changed the way I see music as an integral part of being. Your high standards, the precision, the passion, the unique responsibility that each one of us has comes from you. All of these years, when I think back on them, create this amazing quilt, this amazing tangible quilt that is really part of the fabric of my life. So thank you. We love you, David.